I read this book, which is The Serpent and the Wings of Night. And this is a fantasy romance where we are following a world of vampires and different just magic wielders throughout the story. And it brought to my attention that as much as I enjoy this little like fantasy romance moment, this era that we're in, I am a diehard, hardcore paranormal romance girl to the end of fucking time. And that book just didn't hit the way that I wanted it to. And I realized it's because I need to get back into my paranormal romance bag. If you were here fall of 2021, 2 years ago, two falls ago, I was thriving, honey. I was thriving. I was reading my fever books by Karen Marie Moning. Great time. I was reading Guild. I was in my bag and I want that magic back. So this vlog is brought to you by a little nostalgia. We're gonna jump into some like old school classic paranormal romances because you cannot tell me that they do not eat. Yes, they are problematic. No, they did not age well. Yes, the men are very misogynistic and like all machismo. I understand all those things, but a lot of those complaints to me transfer over to fantasy romance male characters, except they're trying to be like, oh, like womanist or feminist of I let her make her own choices. But we can have a whole debate on how problematic Rhysand is, how problematic Hawk from Blood and Ash is, how problematic Rain was in The Serpent and the Wings of Night. So like we're getting trash men regardless, and I want to go back to the ones that knew they were trash and just existed within that space. They didn't pretend to be something that they weren't. So we're kicking this off. Shout out to Mara from Books Like Whoa, because she told me to check out some Alona Andrews, and Nalini Singh I think is who we also have, and also an author with the last name Hunter. I think this is from a live show that was recommended to me. I don't know. But this vlog is all about nostalgia, jumping back into our paranormal romance bag because it eats, left no crumbs, and fantasy romance can never. I am absolutely just here to tell you guys that I went to Barnes & Noble's today and I grabbed 3 books that I wanted to share with you. First, I grabbed Kiss the Girl. This is book 3 in a meant to be series. The first book was written by Jasmine Guillory. I'll put the cover right here. And the second book was written by, I'm not sure. All of the books in this series are Disney fairy tale retellings. And so this one's supposed to be a fun, modern take on The Little Mermaid. I read and absolutely love the, what is it called? Orchidea Divina? What is the name of that book? The Inheritance of Orchidea Divina. And I loved it, imprinted on my soul, loved it forever. And I know that the author has a YA series that I've had my eye on for a while. I just have not gotten around to reading it. So when I seen that she wrote a romance story that works as a standalone novel, I was utterly freaking compelled because I want to see what she's going to do in a different genre. I want to see how she's going to write a romance story. If she has any of that lyrical type writing that she had in Orchidea Divina, then I'm going to be in heaven. But we have the female character. Her name is Ariel. And she's one of the most famous singers in the world. Her and her sisters have been a part of this band called the Siren 7, which is like a pop culture phenomenon since they were kids. And so she has always lived her life in the spotlight. She has always like succumbed to the pressures of like being a public figure. And so like one summer she decides to kind of like take off her costume and her wig, real Hannah Montana style, and go on like this tour for this band where she meets this up-and-coming band lead singer, and there's a romance between the two of them, but he has no idea who she truly is because she is not in her like public persona. And it just, I'm so excited for this. Like, I feel like I have the potential to like really love it. Not that I'm gonna go back and read any of the other books because I'm not interested in those authors, but just for this book and because it works as a standalone, I'm interested. The next one I grabbed is A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. I've heard amazing things about this author, especially the queer and trans representation in their stories, and I have wanted to check out something from them for a while, and I just, for some reason, never thought to buy a physical copy of their books because I just always kind of planned to read it on my Kindle. But when I seen this in stock next to Kiss the Girl, I was like, this is the perfect perfect time for me to grab it. This is a like Regency romance, I'm pretty sure. That's basically like a general synopsis for what I know for the story. I haven't actually read the full synopsis, but everybody raves about this romance. The biggest complaint that I've heard about the story is that it's very extended and like slow burn, which may be a turn off to other people, but that is a turn on to me. I love a slow burn romance. When the angst is done right and it's not tipping over into pining, I have a ball. And I have not seen slow burn done better than Mariana Zapata. Maybe one or two other books, but like Mariana Zapata is the slow burn queen in my book. And so let's see if she can be toppled. And then the last book I grabbed, I am so stoked about. Like, can I just gag a bit? Because it is called Fever House. Look at this cover. Look at this cover. It's a horror novel. It was in the front of Barnes & Noble, so I think it could be like a new release. But from what I gather from the synopsis, we're following a leg breaker named Hutch who goes to collect overdue drug money from a particular person. And when he gets to their house, there is a severed hand in this client's refrigerator. And so Hutch comes into possession of this hand and soon discovers that this hand induces madness, is very influential, and everyone who is influenced by the hand succumbs to like fits of rage and brutality and violence. And so all of a sudden he has these government co-op operatives after him, as well as like the city of Portland, which is like where this book is set, is also falling under the influence of this hand, and other people is like hunting him down. And so he calls on a colleague of his and he asks them to take the hand. And so this son and his mother are caught up in the web of like this hand of madness, and they are now also being hunted, and government operatives are also after them. And there is some type of connection between this hand of madness and the survival of humanity, and that just sounds like a fun freaking time. It sounds like the perfect read for this spooky season, and I cannot wait to pick this up. Now, did I read any books that were to be included in this vlog today? No, I did not. I did do a lot of reading. I finished a manga, I finished a fantasy, I finished an audiobook. Your girl was on fire, but I did not read what I was supposed to have read for this vlog. So stay tuned in the next clip where I have more to show for the fruits of my labor. So I've officially finished Burn For Me, and this was a solid starting point. The writing style was exactly what I was looking for. The meld between the supernatural elements and the real world was nearly perfect. I typically have always just kind of stuck to werewolves, shapeshifters, and vampires when it comes down to paranormal romances, but the magical abilities that everyone kind of shares in this world, there are people who will choose to reproduce with other people based off the magical or supernatural skills that they have. It is almost like eugenics with the bloodlines, because people are choosing to mate with individuals based off of their money, their status, their influence, as well as their supernatural abilities to kind of create this super child. I don't want to call them like superhumans. Well, technically they are humans, but like, you know, you get the vibe. I will say that this one, the plot of this was really hard for me to get behind, and the romance was lackluster to me for majority of the book. Like, I did not come around to the romance in the story until nearly the very end. I do have to say that I'm still not a fan of the male love interest. Like, for all intents and purposes, he serves the purpose for what he's there for, but he's no Jericho Barons, you know? And I need like another Jericho Barons, if that makes any sense, from the Fever books by Karen Marie Moning. But the writing style of this one, I would say, was closer to Sherilyn Kenyon than it was to Karen, but still has her own like voice, her own authorial tone in and of itself. So I'm gonna settle on 3.5 stars for this one, and I know that we can do better. Will I continue with this series? Yes, because I was interested in everything else, even if it wasn't necessarily like the plot, and the plots change by each book, so I expect that there are going to be some books where the plot worked for me and some books where the plot necessarily doesn't, but I'm on board for the romance, even if I don't necessarily like the male love interest. Maybe he's gonna get better over time. I'm kind of like author taste testing right now, and I'm thriving. I'm living my best life. Like, you cannot tell me that Paranormal Romance was not the rave. It was not the fucking vibe when it was at its tier. And to be fair, it's not even not at its tier anymore. Like, these are authors that have been thriving since like the early 2000s that still have a huge fan base, that are on book like 17 or book 21 in a series. And not that I miss that, because there's so many paranormal romance series out there and it can be overwhelming for someone to kind of read into. But the fantasy romance genre typically tips out by book 3 or 4. You may get a prequel series, you may get a sequel series, but there's not really a fantasy romance story out there that's like releasing book number 19 in the same series like Paranormal Romances. Just food for thought, right? Food for thought. I started Moon Called by Patricia Bridge, and how far did I get? I got about 25% into the book and I decided to DNF. I don't think that this is to my taste or to my cup of tea, even though there's not many like negative critiques that I could make about the story. We're following Mercy, who is a mechanic. She was raised by werewolves. Her stepfather is a werewolf, but she herself is a shifter, and so she can shift into a coyote form. And the book just basically, there's a lot of world building in the beginning, a lot of explanations about different creatures and people with supernatural magical abilities and how they coexist, the tenuous balance in this world, which is like an urban fiction, urban society world. And for the most part, Mercy is the central character and we're really just following her. And in a lot of ways, it reminded me of, what is that called? The October Day series by Shauna McGuire, because you can tell that this entire like series is going to be centered around like Mercy and her journey, and I am just not interested in her as a character. I do think that the world is pretty cool. I do like the idea of her being a shifter, especially because I mentioned earlier that I'm not well versed in like shifter romances or werewolf romances. Like, I've read paranormal worlds and TV shows that include those elements, but they have never been like the main characters for me. And I hope that I'm able to find a series that works for me. But Mercy being the central point of this like story and me not having an interest or a connection with her is just creating a very like disconnected experience with me reading the book. And I kept trying to like read a little bit more to see if there was going to be like this unveiling of a plot, especially because the beginning of this book is so world building, world explanation and lore heavy. I was just like, okay, but like, what is the actual like point of the story? What is the plot? Like, what is going to entice us? And then we got to the point where I could start to see like the layerings of that and the revealings of that, but it just was not interesting enough. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be a romance for her like throughout the story, but as of right now, it's a little too central to a character that I am not interested in. And so I am sad to say that I'm going to be DNFing this one. I'm like 30% into Written and Read, and I have a little bit of like conflicting feelings about the story, but I am enjoying this one so much more than the last one. The intrigue is there. The mystery is there. The world is so creative. So this book is set in our world, of course, because it's an urban like paranormal fantasy or whatever, but it is interesting because humans are not the dominant species. There is a group of individuals called the Others, and they are considered terra indigene, which basically means that they are a group of maybe like vampires, shapeshifters, like all the supernatural creatures that you can think of. They actually dominate Earth, and they allow humans to live amongst them, and humans actually produce a lot of just marketable goods for the economy that sells very well among the Others. And so they have very tenuous contracts where humans are not allowed to enter into the terra indigene spaces, but they do have certain positions like the human liaison that organizes like the selling and exchanging of goods between the Others and the humans. But essentially the terra indigene operate under their own laws, and human rules do not apply within their lands. And so we are following Megan, who is essentially a blood prophet, where she can kind of self-harm in a particular way, and she gets a euphoric feeling from this, but she also is she's hit with these visions of different prophecies, and so her type of humans are very closely guarded. They are kept in confined spaces. Everything about their life is completely controlled, but Meg decides that she is done for one reason or another. We're still unraveling the secrets behind her like leaving, but she decides to go find asylum among the others. And so she is hired by an individual that runs like this bookstore, and he does not like her. He doesn't really want to hire her. He's very aggressive, but at the same time there's something about her that is intriguing to him. And he is inclined to kind of keep her within his orbit while he figures out what it is about her that is so off and different from other humans. The book so far is doing a good job between shifting different POVs and us. I don't really know, again, like what the plot of this book is going to be, or like where we're necessarily headed in terms of like plot devices, but we're shifting to different people who have different motivations, and they're harboring different secrets and secret interests among themselves. And you know that Meg is going to play a part of this, as well as Meg is harboring secrets of her own. But it is very interesting to see the political dynamics between the others and the humans. And I've never really thought of a world where humans were not the dominant species. And so it is interesting to see them portrayed as second-class citizens that are at the nefarious mercy of other very brutal creatures. There's still like a lot of domesticity to the others. So like there's a huge contrast between how they look and talk and communicate very human-like, but they are brutal and animalistic in a lot of ways, but also still civilized. And it's interesting to see all of this come in contrast with each other. I'm really interested, I think, in the world first, and then our characters second, and then the plot third. So I'm here for the ride. I don't really know where we're going, nor do I necessarily care, but I'm having a good time. I am back and I have finished, written, and read. I haven't settled on a star rating for this one because somehow this kind of like slipped into the mix of this vlog. This is much more urban fantasy as opposed to paranormal romance. That probably should have been a heads up that this was not necessarily on the same like path of what I was looking for. It was more of like a parallel journey. I do think that like my biggest complaint about the story is that it is rather long. Even the audiobook for this was about 20 hours long, so it just felt like a much more extended story than I would have liked it to be, even if it was something that I picked up with the intentions of actually reading. I am glad that I read it. I did enjoy it. So maybe I'm gonna settle on like 3.5 out of 5 stars. I would give it a good 3 out of 5. But it feels like I somehow landed here on my journey of looking for something else, and I'm not actually supposed to be here. So we're gonna switch. We're gonna get back on track, and hopefully we're gonna read something that's actually a paranormal romance and not an urban fantasy. I've been meaning to update this vlog for like ever, but I keep forgetting. So before I run into Barnes & Nobles right now, I wanted to let you guys know that the next book I picked up was A Hunger Like No Other, and I am eating it up. I am eating it up. Like 2010, 2005 Monet would have been thriving, honey. I would have been my bag. We have this, like, our main female love interest. She's a half vampire, half Valkyrie, but she doesn't know anything about her vampire side. And so she was raised in a very protected coven by her deceased mother's Valkyrie family. And so she is like in Paris trying to get a feel for the world on her own. And hold on, it's hot. I had to cut on my AC because it's hot as hell in Texas, and like don't even get me started. But yeah, so she is in Paris. She is trying to get a feel for the world of her own, but she is so like, even though she needs blood to survive, her family has raised her to be terrified of the world. She's never drinking from a live subject before. She usually gets her blood from blood banks. And so like, think real Bambi, like real doe in headlights, like so inexperienced. And her bondmate, her soulmate, is actually a particular type of werewolf, and he has been like in prison for like 150 years. So on top of him being animalistic by nature and aggressive by nature, it has been exacerbated due to the almost 2 centuries that he has spent like in prison And one of the biggest regrets that he had before this occurred was that he never found his soulmate, the person that, you know, his bondmate that is supposed to make life worth living. Her people hate like vampires, but they also hate werewolves. Werewolves hate vampires, but they also hate the Valkyrie. And so like all these different factions of supernatural beings don't really rock with one another. And the vampires and the werewolves have been at war for a really long time, but the Valkyries and the werewolves, their war ended like a long time ago. And so he comes across Emmeline, who is his bondmate, and so when he finds out that she is a vampire, he is utterly repulsed, but also weirdly very sexually attracted to her, and it's given very Neanderthal, like beating on the chest, dragging her back to the cave kind of thing, and she is terrified. She doesn't know what the hell is going on, and so he's trying to come back to like whatever little bit of humanity exists within him, but it's given Unhinged. It's given Klaus Michelson, like that level of fucking Unhinged, and I am eating it up. The sexual tension is there. It is a little awkward and problematic because she is not reciprocating this nature. Like, he is scaring the shit out of her, and he is literally like bluntly saying like, I'm going, like, I own you, you're never gonna go home again, like, you and me, we're for life, like, I will rip anybody who stands between me and you to shreds. But I also don't like your people. I don't like the fact that you're a vampire, and I don't believe that I've waited hundreds of centuries for you. Like, that just can't, like, why is my mate another species? Like, what is this? And so it's just, there's so much going on within the plot. I am so intrigued because the vampires, for whatever reason, are hunting Emmeline, and so her family is like going crazy because they're trying to protect her from the vampires, because they don't want the vampires to get their hands on her. And then lo and behold, she's in the arms of the werewolf king, and so her family's like taken aback of like, what the hell, what the fuck, like, why do you have her? Like, you're not, like, we were ready to go to war with the vampires, but like, say less, we'll go to war with you again, we can run that again, like, it's whatever is up. And I am thriving. It's so damn interesting. It's so problematic. It's so early 2000s, but it's giving what it needs to have given. And it's given like a 4-star read for me. It's given, I'm gonna continue with the series. And this is not exactly what I was looking for when I started this vlog, but it's still working for me in a lot of ways. And I don't know, at this point, I feel like, of course, she is going to start to reciprocate feelings towards him, because she will feel and does feel an attraction towards him because they are both bondmates. And so he is leaning more into it in an animalistic way than she is. But like, eventually, I'm sure that her attraction is going to be like reciprocated. But also, like, even with him trying to like humanize himself, he is still in a lot of ways like primal. And so it's like, is she gonna be able to like match his energy? Like, because you're not given like wild bandit cave sex, ma'am. And so like, I'm still afraid that he's gonna tear her apart. Like, are you gonna be able to match his energy? That's the question here. But not that I'm rushing the sex scene, because I would like for her to be much more comfortable than where she is right now, because that's giving cringe. I need him to like back up a little bit, because like, your primal nature, sir, that's not how we act nowadays. Like, I know you've been gone for 150 years, but like, listen, like, we have human rights, we have civil rights, women's suffrage has occurred, like, you need to chill. But at the same time, it's like, you know, yeah. So I'm going into Barnes & Nobles. We'll see if I get any good picks, but I'm definitely gonna be listening to an audiobook while I'm in there. I am back. Let me get my books so that I can show them to you guys. Okay, so before I show you the books that I grabbed while I was at Barnes & Nobles today, I did want to let you know that I finished A Hunger Like No Other, and it was absolutely 4 stars. Am I gonna read all 18 books of this series? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm in deep, we're in the trenches. I'm very, very excited. I also seen that this author has like a ton of books, which is surprising because I've never heard of her before. But she has a ton of books, and a lot of her other series actually cross over. And I think her other series will follow the different factions. Like in this one, we're following a relationship between like the Lyca King, which is like the werewolf king, and a special half vampire, half Valkyrie. But because these different factions have not gotten along for so long, and they have entirely different hierarchies and worlds and organizations of their own, I am very excited to like kind of jump into like different factions, getting to know them and like more details that I did not get to dive into in this book. But I don't know if we're gonna follow the same couple. I did not look that up, and I don't want to. Like, I want to be surprised. But even if we're hopping around to like different couples, that would be interesting. Or I'm cool with sticking with Lachlan and Emmeline for majority of the series. Like, I'm okay with that. Surprisingly, earlier, I was trying to think of Lachlan's name, which is the male love interest, but I'm also reading a Kindle Unlimited dark romance comedy book. And one of the characters in that book is also called Lachlan. And I was thinking maybe I was getting my books confused, but surprisingly, both of these Lachlans are unhinged and rather dark. And yeah, I'm reading two books with two unhinged Lachlans at the same time. I've had a pretty good reading week, and I've had a pretty good book shopping week because tomorrow I am going with a friend to a really large bookstore that's a used bookstore in New Mexico. It's actually their largest book reseller, and I'm super stoked to go check out their books, to unhaul some of my books and sell them. And yeah, that should be fun. But let me show you the books that I grabbed today. So my entire focus for the shopping trip was all things spooky horror, and so those were like the sections of the store that I spent majority of my time in. The first one I'm actually kind of nervous about, but I grabbed Shiver. I've heard that this is like deeply unsettling and is stomach churning, and like it makes people have very visceral reactions to what's happening in the book. I know it's a manga collection of short stories, short horror stories. But yeah, I don't know what to expect, but I am excitedly scared, if that is a thing to be. Yeah. I also grabbed Grady Hendrix' How to Sell a Haunted House. I've wanted to check out this author for a while, and I've heard good things about How to Sell a Haunted House. Maybe I'll do a Grady Hendrix vlog sometime soon. But yeah, I grabbed How to Sell a Haunted House because this is the one that was $5 off and the other ones were still full price, and I'm a girl with a deal. And I also feel like it would be easier for me to get my hands on the Southern Vampire's Guide to, or the Southern... What the fuck is the name of that? The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying a... I'll put the picture here because I don't know the title of that book. I feel like it would be easier for me to access that book via my library or through Libby because it is a backlisted book. And then also My Best Friend's Exorcism I think would be easier to grab than How to Sell a Haunted House because this is a new release. And I know that everybody's going to be grading for this book for the horror spooky season. And so yeah, I was like, let me buy this one so I don't have to fight in my Libby line, and then I'll grab everything else later. I also grabbed Horror Store because it just looked pretty cool. Like, it seems like a very involved physical reading experience, so I didn't want to pick this up on like ebook. I don't even know if this has an audiobook. I have not checked, but just the format of the book itself and the like multimedia aspect made me want to physically read it, and so I grabbed this one. I don't know much about the like book. I know that we're like in this store. It's given like IKEA vibes, but something weird, dark, ominous is happening within this like furniture store of Horror Store. And then I grabbed Rouge by Mona Awad. I have read All's Well Ends Well or something. I'll put the book up here. I'm so bad with titles today, but I read that by this author and I enjoyed it. I haven't read... Has she wrote Bunny? She wrote a different one. It's either Catherine House or Bunny. I can't remember, but picture here. And I haven't read that one, but the feedback and the reviews make it seem very weird, and I'm like iffy on that. But this one is a gothic horror Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I was sold. I was sold because I've read from this author before. She is very well versed in writing unsettling tropes and plots and things in her books that make you think deeper, but like also disturb you in like a like surreal sense, because you don't know if it's the character or if it's you, or if we are as a character and also as a reader, you're reading into like too much into like what's going on within the story, or like if there is some like surrealism, magical realism things that are happening in the supernatural realm within the story itself. I did not like read majority of the synopsis of this one. I just know that it's like a gothic horror Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I was sold on that. It also says that this is like Snow White meets Eyes Wide Shut, and this surreal descent into the dark side of beauty, envy, grief, and the complicated love between mothers and daughters that That sounds wonderful. It has black humor and seductive horror. It explores the cult-like nature of the beauty industry as well as the dangers of internalizing its pitiless gaze. So this sounds like a fun time and I'm super excited. I don't read a lot of horror stories, and so I don't particularly like know my taste. I've wanted to do like a horror taste test for a while because you guys know, if you've been on my channel for a while, if there's a genre that I am not exposed to very often, I will quickly pick up a ton of like recommended books within that genre and then check it out. So yeah, this was like my focus when I went into Barnes & Noble today. And then the last book that I grabbed was S.A. Crosby, All the Sinners Bleed. I am so excited to pick this up. I actually will be reading this for a particular purpose throughout the month of October because I'm going to be participating in Blackoween. So yeah, super excited for this. I am going to bed now, and I hope that you guys have a great night. Over the weekend, I started reading Halfway to the Grave, and I am loving this. It is giving me everything that I was looking for. I am really interested in the main characters. So we're following Kat, who is a half human, half vampire, as a result of her mom being sexually assaulted by a vampire. And so she has grown up with this deep-seated hatred of the undead or of the vampire supernatural world. And she feels this need to make up for how she came into the world and to placate her mother. And so she is out in the world trying to kill as many vampires as she can in hopes that one of the vampires that she actually takes out is the one that sexually assaulted her mom, and so she can kind of make up for her entire existence. But in the beginning, it's weird, it's rocky. She is trying to be like this sexy demon huntress kind of thing, and it's not really working. So she comes across Bones, who is a very old vampire, and he's like, girl, like what you think you're giving, you're not giving, but I'm gonna help you. And so he trains her, he changes her entire appearance, he gives her like more sex appeal, he makes her like sexy and deadly all in one force, and he agrees to help her like on her aims to kill vampires and maybe even find her father so that she can eliminate him in return for him picking the targets that she takes out. And it seems like, you know what, it's a good enough deal. And so far, I am eating it up. I like the banter. I like the interaction between Bones and Kat. I'm enjoying her like development as a character and how she's seeing herself, because she really just wants to have no connection to her undead side or her vampire side. And she feels a lot of remorse and just shame around how she was conceived. And so the more she interacts with Bones, the more she starts to see the world just a tad bit differently and her place in it, and how the strengths that she gets from her vampire side actually can help her. And so yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing where she ends on her journey. But this is definitely like my type of vibe, my type of series. It feels like another one that I'm gonna read like most of the books in the series for, because I really like the writing and I like the logistics and how the author kind of explains stuff. Like even with Kat's existence, the way Bones explained it to her is that, you know, when a vampire is first turned, they have a lot of like, one second. Sorry about that. I got a phone call that I had to take. But as I was saying, there was this explanation that Bones was giving to her around how as soon as a human is turned into a vampire, there are still some bodily functions that have to like, I guess, meet their way out. And so as soon as a vampire turns, they may be able to still cry real tears, or they may be able to go to the bathroom still. So basically the only way that Kat as a half human, half vampire could have come into existence is if her mom had a sexual interaction with a freshly turned vampire who still had a little bit of like semen left within his body. So it's just little things like that where she fleshes out the world with a logic that feels realistic to me, and I can really be invested in it. And so I feel like I have like, you know, I'm getting my teeth and my bearings within this world, and it's just making me feel so much more comfortable within the story. I don't know how long I have left. I think I'm like 30% of the way in, so I definitely won't be able to finish today, but just wanted to check in with you guys and let you know that this one so far may be my top read of the vlog. So I finished reading Halfway to the Grave like 4 days ago and really just did not have the willpower to come and update this vlog, but I really enjoyed it. It's probably my favorite of the vlog. Not even probably, that was definitely my favorite book of the vlog so far. I enjoyed Cat and Bones so much. I enjoyed their romance. This was perfectly violent. It was giving all the vibes, all the Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the descriptions of like bones cracking and blood pouring out and heads flying off of their bodies. It was like everything that I wanted it to be. And I was so proud of Kat from where we met her in the beginning, and just how like taciturn she was and how nervous and how awkward she was. Like by the end, she had earned her, earned her stripes very much, and came to a place of relative comfortability with her being like half vampire, half human. I still think that she has a very weird relationship with her mom. There's one scene in the book, which might be a tiny spoiler, where she kind of like decks her mom in the face, and I just thought that that was insane. Definitely the wildest child-parent interaction that I've seen in a book, but it just goes to show like how far she came on her journey. Absolutely will be reading the next book in this series. But so far, like what I set out to do with this vlog, which was to thrive in my paranormal romance era, to take it back to a nostalgic time, is giving everything that I wanted to be. Like, will paranormal romance ever not hit? For me personally, probably not. Like, I am so apprehensive with like fantasy romance love stories, just because like it's all angst and pining and like all tropes, and I'm just like, like, don't give me the trope, execute the trope. Okay, don't just put the trope in there, execute it and make it well, and make it yummy, make it messy, make it something that I just am addicted to and cannot put down. And paranormal romance is that for me. It has been a minute since I last updated this vlog, but I just finished Angel's Blood by Nalini Singh, and I really like this one. It reminded me a lot of the premise from Burn For Me, which is like one of the first books that I read in this vlog. We are following Elena, who is this vampire hunter. She has like supernatural abilities that give her proclivities for hunting down vampires and eliminating them. But in this world, it's a paranormal world, of course, so we're in regular urban society, but there are humans, which kind of exist really at the bottom, and then there are vampires, and then there are archangels. So she is seeked out and hired by this all-powerful, infamous archangel to hunt out another one gone bad, and she really just deals in the realm of vampires. So she doesn't feel like she is fully prepared or capable of seeking out someone so much more powerful than the already powerful creatures that she deals with on a regular basis. Now, there is a romance, of course, that happens within the story between Elena and the archangel that hires her, whose name is Raphael. And while this one did feel similar to the premise for Burn For Me, so if you read Burn For Me and liked it, I do think that you should check this one out. But it also really reminded me of Crescent City, about how the world is set up and how archangels kind of control different territories, and they are all powerful and really hard to beat, especially when one of them goes very rogue. And Elena, in a lot of ways, while she's not similar to Bryce, but her relationship and her hunting down Angel Gone Wrong really just reminded me of a lot of the components of Crescent City that I really enjoyed. And so that definitely helped me enjoy this one as well. I think that I would read the sequel to this one. It's not as high up on my list as reading the sequel to Halfway to the Grave. I definitely think that that is my favorite that I've read in this vlog. And then also, I think secondly, I would read the sequel to A Hunger Like No Other. Those two are definitely the shining stars, and they're probably what I'm going to spend the next few months, the remaining part of the year, checking out and reading. But this whole vlog has been so much fun for me to dabble down memory lane and check out authors that I didn't get a chance to really check out when this was all the fad and all the hype. But do I think that these stories age very well? I do. I think that they still eat, and I'm always going to stand by that. So if you've made it to the end of this video, leave me, I don't know, a vampire emoji, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.